On this episode of the Florida Files, we will investigate the mysterious emergence of the bubonic plague in 1920s, Pensacola. The winter of 1920 drifted over Pensacola, Florida, with a calm so ordinary that no one could have imagined what was coming. The air was brisk along the waterfront, filled with the smell of pine tar, salt, and coal smoke from the ships that still crowded the harbor. It was a time of rebuilding. The Great War had ended 2 years earlier, and the city's sailors, dock workers, and merchants were finding their rhythm again. In the neighborhoods beyond Palafox Street, children played stickball in the dirt roads while their mothers hung laundry in the cool morning light. Rats darted under porches and between market stalls, but no one thought much of it. They had always been part of the city's rhythm too. Pensacola had seen its share of sickness before. Yellow fever, typhoid, and influenza all visited the small coastal hamlet, but the doctors who lived here prided themselves on modern medicine. They trusted microscopes and laboratories more than superstition. The first case slipped into Pensacola quietly. The boss was a longshoreman who came home one evening from the docks with fever and chills. By dawn, he was delirious, his skin gray and his body racked with pain. His wife thought it was influenza, the same Spanish flu that had ravaged so many homes just 2 years earlier. Dr. Herbert Lee Bryans, one of Pensacola's most respected physicians, was called to the small wooden house. The doctor had treated countless fevers, but this one troubled him. The man's pulse raced, and a lump had formed in his groin, swollen and black beneath the skin. Bryans knew the word for it from medical school, bubo, but he had only read of it in history books. He kept his fears to himself. The man died soon after. Dr. Bryans sent tissue samples to the state laboratory in Jacksonville. Days later, a telegram arrived on his desk. The message was short, written in the detached tone of laboratory correspondence. Specimen positive for Yersinia pestis, bubonic plague, the same disease that had swept across Europe in the Middle Ages and left millions dead. The Black Death was reborn on Florida's Gulf Coast. Bryans knew what the discovery meant. If he was wrong, he would cause panic. If he was right, his silence could kill thousands. He decided to notify the State Board of Health. Word spread swiftly up the chain of command, and by the end of the week, federal health officers from the U.S. Public Health Service were on a train to Pensacola. The first victim's house was sealed. His bedding and clothes were burned in the yard. His family was quarantined, guarded day and night by city police. Neighbors crossed the street rather than pass too closely. The inspectors searched for a source. They found it in the walls and under the docks. Rats. Dozens of them. Some already dead, others crawling with fleas. The fleas carried the same invisible bacteria that had destroyed medieval cities half a world away. It seemed impossible that such a thing could happen in a modern American town, yet the evidence was undeniable. The harbor, teeming with ships from New Orleans, Havana, and Belize, had offered the perfect highway for disease. The city that once pulsed with music and laughter fell silent. Businesses closed early. Church bells tolled too often. Children were kept indoors. The Pensacola Journal published calm, measured headlines. State health officers respond to mysterious fever. But whispers spread through every neighborhood. Some said the disease had come from a shipwrecked crew, others that it was God's punishment for the city's sins. By the end of February, there were more deaths. A woman who worked near the wharf, a sailor from Louisiana, a child. The illness moved without pattern, striking randomly and killing quickly. At night, the city's trolley cars clattered through empty streets carrying health officers with lanterns. They tacked signs on infected homes, small, discreet placards that carried the weight of dread. Inside, families waited in silence, knowing the city outside saw them as contagious ghosts. Rats became the enemy. City workers, armed with traps and buckets of poison, began what newspapers called the Rat War. The Board of Health declared every home must be rat-proofed. Trash was to be burned. Floors were to be sealed. Inspectors mapped every block. Their records show a grim efficiency. Over 35,000 rats and mice captured and examined in the months that followed. Red dots on their maps marked the infected ones, spreading outward from the docks like spilled ink. The war on rats was brutal work. Men carried barrels of disinfectant through the alleys, spraying the walls and drains with carbolic acid. The people of Pensacola were horrified that the Black Death walked the streets of their sleepy town. Some residents refused to let inspectors in, others fled altogether. Each morning, traps were checked. Dead rats were piled high, their bodies soaked in kerosene and burned. Children watched the fires from their porches, the smell of death and chemicals heavy in the air. City Hall called for calm, but it was hard to keep faith when coffins were being buried in quicklime. Undertakers wore gloves and masks, and funeral services were held outdoors. Dr. Bryans continued to visit the sick, even as the fear grew around him. He had become both a savior and a symbol of danger. Children whispered that the doctor carried the plague in his coat pockets, but Bryans kept working, documenting each case, sending every sample to the state lab. In April, inspectors began demolishing entire structures. Old warehouses and boarding houses near the waterfront were torn down, their debris soaked in disinfectant and set ablaze. The city smelled like smoke and salt for weeks. By early summer, there were no new deaths reported, but no one trusted the silence. Pensacola had seen the plague, and once you saw it, you could never forget it. The people of Pensacola had always balanced science with faith. They prayed for healing even as they boiled water and cleaned their floors, but the plague brought old fears back to life. Some preachers declared the sickness divine punishment, comparing it to the plagues of Egypt. Immigrants were blamed. Dock workers from Cuba and black laborers from Mobile were shunned by their neighbors. In every epidemic, fear looked for someone to blame. But the scientists pressed forward. The Public Health Service's campaign became a model for the South. Posters urged citizens to protect your home from rats. Schools taught children to store grain properly and keep their homes sealed. City officials drafted new ordinances to require rat-proof construction for all buildings. Pensacola, once a sleepy port, became a case study for modern epidemiology. Its tragedy was being rewritten as a triumph of science. Yet for those who lived through it, triumph was a hollow word. They remembered the silence that fell over the bay at dusk, the empty pews at Sunday service, and the smell of disinfectant in every street. Almost a year after the first case, in December 1921, a young woman living near the wharves became ill. She had been helping her husband clear debris from a condemned building. Within days, she developed the same telltale swelling and fever that Dr. Bryans had seen before. He knew instantly what it was. She was the final recorded victim of the bubonic plague in Florida. Her death marked the end of the outbreak. The State Board of Health declared the city free of disease by spring 1922. No further human cases would ever be recorded in the state again. The relief was enormous. Ships returned to the harbor, markets reopened. Families scrubbed their walls clean and painted over the memories of the past year. Pensacola exhaled at last. But something had changed. People spoke differently about sickness and death. They understood now that the modern world was not immune to ancient horrors. The lessons learned shaped the state's future. Rat-proofing became law in every port city. Sanitation campaigns expanded statewide. The Florida Department of Health established permanent disease surveillance, tracing its origin back to those anxious months in Pensacola. Dr. Bryans continued to practice medicine quietly until his retirement. He rarely spoke of the plague years, though colleagues later said he carried the memory with him always. Today, few in Pensacola know that the Black Death once walked their streets. The outbreak never became legend. It left no memorial, no monument, only a faint scar in the city's history. But for a brief, haunting moment, the same disease that once terrified medieval Europe found its way to the Gulf of Mexico and reminded Florida that no age, not even the modern one, was beyond its reach. We want to thank you for watching this episode of the Florida Files. Please consider hitting that like button and subscribing so you don't miss out on future episodes.